Y'all know what it is.
Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Gustavo Razzetti. Gustavo is the CEO and founder of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy that helps teams do the best work of their lives. Gustavo is the creator of the Culture Design Canvas, a framework used by thousands of teams and organizations the world over to map, assess, and design their culture. For more than 20 years, Razzetti has utilized this process to aid leaders from the Fortune 500, startups, nonprofits, and everything in between to create powerful and effective company cultures. Outside of his consulting work with clients, Gustavo regularly speaks with leaders and teams about culture change, teamwork, and hybrid workplaces. Additionally, he's a prolific writer and the author of 4 books on culture change, leading to his insights being featured in the New York Times, Psychology Today, Forbes, BBC, and Fortune, among others. Gustavo's coaching and tools have helped countless executives and teams develop work environments where people collaborate to accelerate individual and collective performance, and he joins us here today to share his insights with our audience. Please join us in welcoming to the show, CEO at Fearless Culture, Gustavo Razzetti. Hey, Gustavo, how are you, man?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, we're very grateful to have you here. Appreciate it. So cool. So Gustavo, let's, I guess, kind of start at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about just sort of who you are, your background, where you come from, and what we're doing today.
Absolutely. I'm a passionate cook or chef. That's
Love it.
And an avid biker. I like to road bike a lot. I spend a lot of time during the weekend doing that. But from a professional standpoint, most of my career has been as a consultant, but in the marketing and innovation field. And at some point, I realized that what companies lack is not resources or ideas or solutions that I look into consultants for that, but actually they need a culture that's more open, that's more conducive, that helps those ideas, those resources and talent see the light of day. And that's how I switched my career, still in consulting, but now focus on helping companies design their workplace culture.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's amazing. And I think maybe a good place to start or to tee off from that is actually having a brief discussion about the definition of culture. So I think, and it sounds like it's kind of I guess, an easy concept that people could grasp, right? I think we all have an idea of what culture means. But I think that in a business context, this is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot. People say culture all the time, and I don't know if they actually mean culture. So I wonder if, just to frame our whole conversation, if you wouldn't mind sort of describing for our audience what you're talking about when you're talking about a corporate culture.
Sure. I think that a culture sometimes is very abstract, but our role is to make it more specific. It's like water. If you're a fish, you don't notice the water, no? So you say, what's water? You're swimming there. But the problem is when that water starts to get contaminated or toxic or turbulent, and you need to swim around to make sure you're not going to crash against a rock, that's where you realize what culture is all about. So on a good day, you don't notice the culture of a company. You see the people performing, people are happy, people are doing great work. But on a bad day, it's really evident, through toxic behaviors, infights, a lack of alignment, a low quality of work, and people that want to quit. So culture in the end is a system. It's not one single thing. Definitely, it's not just core values. Some people feel, I have a set of core values, I have a culture, where that's a definition of culture. The culture is the reality of how your people work together, and that system involves the emotions. How do I feel about being part of a team? How do I feel about my colleagues, about my boss, about the way we work? But also the mindset. Do I have a mindset, our culture have a mindset that's a winning mindset? Do we have a perfectionist mindset? Do we have a blaming mindset? And lastly, the behaviors, the things that we do, but also the things that we avoid doing. Because some cultures are not about doing things, but also conversations we don't want to have, or problems we don't want to tackle, or performance issues we don't want to discuss among ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, and I think that, like you mentioned, it is a very abstract idea, but when you break it down in terms, like the fish in water, it's clear that culture is sort of everything and nothing all at once. It's like, it's all the things, right? And so I wonder, there's, a couple of different ways to approach this conversation. I mean, there's obviously in today's day and age, there's a little bit more of a remote discussion to be had. But I think, or I wonder if we couldn't maybe start sort of, I guess, earlier on in business. And I want to ask you, is culture something that can be built? So, obviously you run a consultancy based on this, so I think I know the answer. But but ultimately, there's an authenticity that comes along with culture, right? There's this idea that, we behave a certain way because we behave a certain way, and it's sort of natural or organic. Again, it's the fish in the water, right? It's just organic. It's how we live. But it's clear that certain leaders can bring a culture to the table, or maybe certain teams can bring a culture to the table. So I wondered if you talk about just sort of, can you build a culture?
I think it's a great question because it's tricky. What do we mean by build or design? I call my role and my team role, we are culture designers. And people say, no, you cannot design culture. Culture is organic. And I think that design, you have a lot of startup CEOs or founders listening. The same way to apply the concept of user experience design or customer service design, we apply the same principle. So we try to gather insights from the people, the users, in this case, the employees, to design the culture. It's about finding that right balance between defining certain elements, but also allowing freedom for people to do their best work. So the organic approach is like, we're going to let people do whatever, and the culture is going to emerge. In most of those cases, things go south pretty quickly. On their end of the spectrum, if you want to be very directional, very prescriptive, and try to control culture like a leader, that's not going to work. So it's a combination of the role of leaders is to define what's the identity, what's the collective identity of how we want to work, what's our purpose, why do we want to be part of this team, what are we trying to create together. But then you need to give people the freedom to decide how you're going to get there. I always use the analogy of a city. So if you're the mayor of a city, you can set certain rules. You can define this is going to be a two-way street, what's the maximum speed, whatever you want to do about how people should interact. Because if there's no rules, then it's going to be chaos. However, people are going to choose, do I want to walk? Do I want to take a cab or Uber? Do I want to drive? What music I'm going to listen? I'm going to do a graffiti on the wall. So that combination between certain agreements and the personal behaviors is what brings culture to life. So that's kind of our approach to design. Define certain parameters without being too prescriptive, but then let people define the how to get there.
I like that. I've been reading a book recently, actually listening to it online, and it's about how the book is actually called How Google Works. It's by Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg. And they talk about the early days of Google and how they developed their company culture and things that they did and approaches that they took to scale Google and to hire the right employees. And one of the things that they focused on was allowing people to kind of just be themselves and not get in the way of their actual creative process. And I'm kind of curious for you and your work history, why did you get into culture specifically, and why is this your focus? Did you have any experiences in the past that were that caused you to step back and say, hey, this is something I need to address. This is something I'm good at. Did you have a toxic work environment at one point that made you leave a job?
Definitely. I think that we all experience good and really bad cultures, and I went through all that, but also I was a culprit of being as a leader, Like one thing that happens is when you're part of a team, you say, hey, I don't want to do these things that my leader is doing, but then you become the leader. I became the CEO of a consulting firm and I screw up. I try to impose my way of working to a company that was different rather than try to find not necessarily an in-between, but a different approach. And I failed, and it took me a lot of time to recognize that my approach wasn't working. So it wasn't just about changing the direction, but also approaching culture differently. And also to your question, like when I was working with clients, they started asking organically for advice. Hey, I'm starting with my boss, I'm starting with my team members. So I started getting into that field naturally, and then it became like a water, so to speak.
Can you give some examples of some things that you did that were kind of counterproductive, that you learned and realized, oh, hey, if I would have approached this differently, things might have worked out smoother and you wouldn't have had those hiccups?
Absolutely. One example is I got into an organization in which I was hired as CCO to raise the bar, grow the business, transform, etc. But and that necessarily required like a change of direction and processes and the culture. But I failed to acknowledge that the culture was very close-knit, very tribal. So there were some people that were key influencers that I didn't respect, or I didn't bring into a table, or I didn't try to navigate around them. And so they became kind of a rebel. And I think that this is an interesting story because no one is perfect. One of those guys quit, and not only quit, but encouraged a lot of people to quit the company, and they started to start quitting by masses. It's funny, but it wasn't funny. And so I have to turn things around. I have to get in front of people, be very candid, acknowledge my own mistakes, etc. And then things started to turn around. And some of the people that left came back, and that was a sign of, okay, we're in the right direction. Also, the integrating both cultures.
Like that. So in that book that I just referenced, they discussed, like working with creatives versus like just a normal 9-to-5 job, that you're not doing design work or building software or this or that. And some of the things that they addressed was like allowing people to have their own workspace. If you have a bunch of stuff on your table, that's fine. Do your thing. Allowing them to kind of have more flexible hours, allowing them to, one of the examples that they had, Google was in the early days, was having issues with search results, bringing up ads that weren't related to the search results. And the guy in charge of the team, instead of going and even saying anything about it, he just printed a screenshot of the search results, put it on the board, and said, "These results suck." And that was just in the workroom, and he didn't say anything about it. And they came back the next 2 or 3 days later, they had a solution, and people just kind of naturally went and found a solution for the thing or the problem without even having to address it. It was just more like, hey, here's a problem. There you go. Address it. Take care of it. And I'm wondering, is there, as far as creating a good work culture around like the creative aspect of things, is that more complicated to do versus just, I work at Subway, I'm coming in to make a sandwich? I mean, there's got to be a different kind of approach that you take for different types of jobs. And I slaughtered that question, but I hope you got where I was getting.
No, absolutely. And I love the example, and I remember reading about it. That's a great thing. That I would say that every business industry has its own challenge when it comes to designing their culture. I don't know if a creative industry, when you're working with creative folks, is more challenging. I think it's more challenging for the leader themselves, because usually what you were describing is a culture of freedom and accountability. So the leader sets the bar and say, hey guys, these results suck. And they don't need to tell what they need to do. They don't need to agree on a deadline or how it's going to be resolved. They trust that people are going to take care of the issue. And so creatives like that environment. Creative people like where they are challenged, where someone is not raising their bar, but also giving them space to figure it out.
Yeah.
For many leaders, or so-called leaders, they just happen to have the title, that's hard, because for them it feels, oh, I don't have ownership of the solution. People are going to solve it without me being involved, and that's hard. That's really hard for leaders. So going back up, how much you want to define and how much room you want to leave for people to do their work. But in most industries, even in Subway, you need people to figure it out, because that's the way how people can find better solutions, or even create new sandwiches that people are looking for to better serve their customers, rather than just repeating their tasks day after day after day.
Like that.
I'd like to call back to your experience. You were describing that when you were a leader, you were in a position where you had underestimated the tribalism on the team, and basically as a result of not being aware of that situation, you had people quitting and things like that. And I wanted to ask you about sort of the power structure, the hierarchy of power as it pertains to how much leadership or like how much control should a leader provide over the culture versus how much power should the people working in the business have. And a good recent example is, and actually they're a dime a dozen right now with the return to work, but, with people going back to work after working remotely during COVID, there was the sort of semi-recent story of Elon Musk coming out and very brazenly saying everybody's back to the office or you're done. Like, that's it. It was a pretty hard stance on ending remote work. And, I think he softened a little bit over time, but with him, and maybe he's a unique character given his charisma and all this stuff, but in general, that was a very top-down decision, a mandate by a leader who's now saying, remote work's over, you're coming back to work. And he really took that situation. Alternatively is sort of what you described, which is, you underestimated the tribalism, the tribe rose up against you and they started quitting. And so now all of a sudden they've got all the power and you as the leader doesn't have any. So can you talk a little bit about sort of just the role of the leader and sort of how to strike that balance between, staying in charge and being the authority, or, in the case of Elon Musk, the founder or the creator of the company, and how much power you need to be giving over to your teams, to the extent that, could they take over the business entirely?
Amazing question. It has a lot of layers. Let me see where we get started. There are three levels of power that come to play. One is the power that the title and its authority gives you as a leader, formal leader. No, so and in the case of Musk, he's also the founder, not the founder, but the owner of the company, majority owner. So that gives him like an authority position. Then there's the influence. Those are the personal relationships. So there are people that probably don't have the title, but have build the trust. They have been there for a long time, so they have the influence to move people in one or different directions. And then there's the expertise. You are good at coding, you're good at problem solving, you're good at copywriting, and people go for you, and you have a reputation, an authority, a leadership based on that expertise. So I think that it's not either you're an autocratic leader and you have to impose, but it's not on the way where we're all very democratic, very open, people can do whatever. It's finding that right balance. There are different types of culture. There are cultures that are more top-down, more directive. There are cultures that are more tribal. There are cultures that are more aggressive, in which the leader only sets the goal and say, hey guys, we need to grow 30% and then do whatever. But if you don't deliver, boom, you're axed. And then there are cultures that are more about the ideation and promote collaboration, people working together. So depending on the type of culture you want, that's the leadership you want to have. No, ideally, we want leaders who are good at setting the goal, setting the vision, but then letting people come up with the solution without the leader having to be involved in it.
Yeah. How does working remote come into play when working with a company culture? It's got to be really challenging to work on a team of people and never actually see them in person, and then actually develop that culture and develop that a work experience that everyone can be a part of and feel included and want to work for the team versus just coming in for the paycheck.
Yeah, I think that first of all, there are companies that have been operating remotely for decades and they're still in business, they're growing and people love to be there. Yep. There are many multinational teams that, because people work in different locations, different countries, they have learned how to operate remotely. I think the key thing, it's not remote or no remote or hybrid, it's about the intentionality. So there were a lot of leaders that thought that the culture was their office. So the thing that people show up to work, they share a space, basically that create connection. And at some point it can, but I always use the example, think of a couple that have been married for decades, they share the same bedroom, they share the same bed. That doesn't guarantee there's love, that doesn't guarantee there's connection, that doesn't guarantee there's a shared goal. So proximity is a factor, but not necessarily guarantees that there's going to be belonging. You need to design it, no? And I think that many companies fail to do that. There's a lot of research that shows that if you're in an open space office, you're only going to connect with the people that are a couple of feet away from you. So if people are in another floor, in the other corner of the building, you're never going to interact with them. The problem is, before the pandemic, no one paid attention to that. When people started working remotely, they started worrying about things like connection. There are two things that are important. First, when it comes to productivity or performance, most people not only their productivity didn't suffer, but in most cases, many teams improve when they started working either fully remote or in a hybrid way. But also the second part of your question, belonging, that connection, feeling that I'm part of a team, that glue that brings people together. I'm not just there for the paycheck. It can be designed remotely. First, remote teams get to see each other from time to time. It's not that they never see, they intentionally say, hey, once a year, once a quarter, we're gonna get together. Sometimes it happens at a company level, sometimes because of size and proximity at a local level, or regional level, or team level. There's a company, for example, GoTo, the software development, they have the GoTo meeting and many other applications that they organize community events in different regions in the US, and people, even though they are not from the same team, they go and serve and help at a food bank. And that's organized by the company. So they get to meet other colleagues, they interact, they do good together. So that creates that emotional connection. There are some other people like GitLab that get their teams or Slack they get back into the office, mostly to spend time together. They take them out for lunch or dinner to spend time to build that stuff. So once again, it's not if you can do it or not remotely, it's how you can do it. You can succeed in a fully in-person environment, in a fully remote or in a hybrid one, or you can fail in either of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it is interesting to hear, some of the different ways that companies dealt with, the pandemic and things like that, as far as cultural activities. I wanted to ask that, or maybe that dovetails nicely into this idea of authenticity in culture. And we talked about this, just, touched on it briefly moments ago. But the idea is that, how authentic, I guess, does a culture need to be? And here's what I mean. So I saw, as we were doing research for the show, you worked in a number of different ad agencies, some of the big dogs, the Leo Burnett's of the world and things like that. I too come from an advertising background. And one of the things that happened, I guess it's been several years since I worked in agency, but the last time I worked in agency, what was going on was basically the trends, across advertising were big open to, spaces, really modern furniture, foods, fully stocked kitchens, all this kind of stuff, right? And these were the things that the big companies were doing, and smaller agencies felt like for retention or for other reasons, we needed to have those things too. Well, that was, I guess, in my opinion, sort of a inauthentic version of culture, right? I'm creating this culture because I see this is what other places are doing, and I feel like, we should do that too. So instead of focusing on, team building activities or building relationships across our teams, we're going to get you guys every caffeinated food product we can get and put it into the kitchen. So here you go. You guys have all the caffeine you want, just stay at work all night. And so, in my mind, that was sort of an inauthentic version of culture. When in this same example, working for that same agency, they had a very familial culture. Everybody there was, as if they were a family. It was a family-run agency. And the father and his three sons ran the business, and everybody was sort of a part of the family, right? So really, that was the stronger bit of their, culture. And that was the part where everybody felt, they belonged. But as soon as they started pretending that they were some other big New York agency or something, people began to lose sort of, I guess, faith in the culture. And so I wonder, framing in an example like that, and I don't know how good of an example that is, but the concept is, is it important that a culture within an organization sort of spring naturally from maybe the founders or the people who are a part of the leadership? Or is it better to, I guess, I don't know, fake it till you make it, build out your office, right? And, do all the things you think people need for retention or whatever else?
I think that that's a great, I think authenticity is crucial. So you need to build the culture that basically you're going to deliver on. So a culture that's aligned who you are as a leader and how you're going to show up as a leader. Not trying to copy what other people are doing, it's not going to help, but actually it's going to make you feel ridiculous. You talk about advertising, no? So one thing that happens in the advertising world is that you try to impose an idea to the client and say, hey, this is going to look good on you. In the case of designing culture, it's like you're helping someone choose their right outfit. In the end, the person that's going to wear that outfit is the client, not you. So it needs to look good on the person. It needs to feel authentic. You don't want people to laugh at that. So finding that tension is really important. Of course, you want to evolve culture. Usually founders have a big role in defining the culture of their company, but at some point that needs to evolve. One thing is evolve, another thing is copy pasting what other people are doing. And that's consultants tend to fail into, hey, this is cool because Google did it, or a CEO reads a book and they want to copy what Slack or anyone else is doing. Also, Airbnb is doing this, so I'm going to copy it. And that doesn't feel good. You need to find your own way to show up, and that's challenging. The last thing I want to mention, when you talk about perks don't define culture. Perks actually are cheap bait to keep people working longer hours. You have caffeinated because we want to stay. We're going to give you free sushi, but at 8, so people stay longer hours. So usually they're not necessarily to build that connection, but they're more of a tool to keep people working more hours rather than having a more balanced kind of a lifestyle.
I tell you what, you give me free sushi, I'll be there all night.
Count me out. Well, I guess we see each other too, a lot.
So I hate to keep referencing this book, but I was reading it or listening to it on my drive home over the weekend. I had a long drive, and it's just top of mind. One of the things that they also did in this book is they allowed the employees to actually participate in the interview process. So like your coworkers are actually doing the initial interviews, and then they're filling out a evaluation form on the person, and then it kind of goes up from there. Do you see that as an effective approach? As far as it makes sense to me, if I'm doing an interview of a potential person that I'm going to be working with, I want this person to be a quality employee. I want him to be someone that's going to be dedicated. I want him to be someone that's going to, I'm not going to have to hold their hand. I'm not going to have to babysit them the whole time. Someone that's actually going to be a value add to the company. Have you seen that approach in the past at other places? And what are your thoughts on allowing other employees to actually be a part of the hiring process and doing some of the interviews?
I like the approach, but once I'm talking about balance. So in the past, the manager or the leader of a team was the one who was the hiring manager and usually made the call, and rarely they involve people in the process. Then things switched, and now we have a more democratic approach that everyone wants to have a saying, and it becomes a little bit of a complicated process.
Sure.
I think that the team needs to clarify how they're going to hire. It's important that the people that are going to work with the new team member can interact with that person, but not everyone needs to agree on that. And I think that the leader should be the one who can have a last check-in call to push back to see is this person aligned with the type of culture we're trying to bring, and also make sure that people don't are bringing someone that they like because it's a good person, but also is going to be a great professional. No? One thing that's happened, you talk a lot about the remote. Now that we are hiring talent across the board and remotely, that allows not only to meet with the person to see, hey, is this a good fit, is a nice person, but also to do some work together. So if it's we're hiring a software engineer, maybe we can start solving a problem together and not only see if this person has the skills, but also is he going to be an open-minded, collaborative kind of team player, or is going to try to figure out things on their own? So that's the most interesting part about the hiring as a team, not the democratic, everyone has a say on who's the candidate, but allowing people to interact and actually do something together through experience to really figure out how this person's going to play when they join the team.
I like that. You mentioned that software and doing a code along and actually seeing how the person works and so on and so forth. And you've actually built some software in the past. I'm sorry, but I can't see on my notes the name. Is it Design Canvas? Did I get it right? Did I find it? Is it?
Yeah, the tool. Yeah.
Yeah, culture design canvas. Can you tell us about the process of building that, what it is, and how it has evolved over the years as far as like iterations and changes you've made to it?
Yeah, basically that's I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Osterwalder's business model canvas that many companies and startups use to define their business model and what is going to make them different. Well, this tool I created, the culture design canvas, is a version of it, but instead of focusing on business model, it's about designing the culture of an organization. And it can help you map the current state or ideate the ideal state. No, so it's also where are we, but where do we want to go? And it went through a couple of iterations in terms of tweaking the content and what are the elements that define culture. But the most important thing is it includes 3 key elements. At the core of that canvas, it's what we call the long-term vision or the foundation of culture. What's your purpose, core values, and the behaviors. And that's the things that are the things that the leader of the company or the leadership of the company should define and own the most. Then on the right side includes the belonging, the emotional side of culture. What's the glue that brings people together, and includes elements such as psychological safety, how people feel safe or not to express their opinions, concern, ask questions. How do we give feedback to each other, and team rituals. And the other side of culture is more functional. It's the elements of culture that provides agility, that includes how we make decisions as a team, how we collaborate and manage meetings, and the norms and rules and all the team agreements.
Okay, I think I must have misunderstood. I thought it was software, and Ryan just messaged me in private and said, "Hey, I think it's just a piece of paper that breaks it down." Is that correct?
It has a digital. I mean, we see it also a mirror other piece, but it's not necessarily a software. But it's basically, it helps you identify the software, the operating system of your company, your culture.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I like it. And I've seen this used before as like a lean canvas, as you described, right? This is basically a way for you to kind of put on paper all the things that you want to do in your business. To look for differentiation. I think this is really smart. And I wanted to talk about it just sort of like, okay, so let's say I'm a company and I believe that I have problems with my culture, but I would like to, maybe I need to engage with somebody like you to redesign or help us formalize our processes or our cultures. But how might I self-assess myself? Are there some, like, I guess, elements of good culture and elements of bad culture? Like, is there a way for me to objectively assess that I need help?
That's a great point. I mean, not every request starts with I need to this. Many times there's a management or leadership team a change, or there's some kind of merger and acquisition, something that happens in the company that drives this. But the way to see that something's going wrong, it's the most evident thing is when things are not going the way the CEO wants. No, so basically there's a gap between the expectations, how the people need to show up, or a gap between the goals or the speed that we want to have and how people are operating. No, so I think that that would be for me the most important tension. What's the thing what are the expectations from the top leadership, and what are the expectations or reality from the people? And that's the first thing that we want to identify. And then it's, do we need to recalibrate the expectations of the leaders, or do we need to adjust how people are showing up, or is it a combination of both? Then there are some more evident signs when there's toxicity, people that don't talk to each other, or they're being extremely disrespectful, or people that are not even showing up or delivering their work. No, they're not sticking to their commitments. Those are things that are easier to spot, but that's when you're getting more into a toxic kind of culture, and you're getting the worst grade or degree that you can get when you get to see those behaviors.
So as a business owner, if I was trying to do this assessment and I was trying to look at my current state, maybe I don't know what I need, and that's why I'm reaching out to a consultant like you. I mean, can I use this culture design canvas just as an individual and do my best to like fill in the blanks to help reveal the problems, or help me see where maybe we're falling flat, or maybe we're missing and need help?
Absolutely. I mean, the way we operate is, first we provide tools. People go to our website and they're going to find not only the tool that they can download, but also facilitation guides. So if you want to do it on your own, there is it. We also, some people say, hey, we want to do it on our own, but we need some training. So we provide training for people to facilitate the tool and use it. And then for more complex or larger organizations, they say, hey, how can you do it for us? There's also people that start doing the work on their own and then they get stuck because sometimes it's hard to facilitate conversations. You understand the process, but people are not going to be opening up with their leaders or their HR team as much as they do with people like us, because not only we're outsiders, but we've been doing this for many years. We know the tricks. So it's a balance. But once again, we don't want to be prescriptive. We want to provide people options. You want to do it for free on your own. Here are the tools. You want to get training so you can do it better. We offer programs. We want us to run for you. Here it is. So.
Okay. Do you mind talking a little bit about your facilitation process? Like I gathered, and I don't know this to be true, but from things that I saw on your website and everything, it looks like maybe you leverage sort of like an agile training kind of methodology where you do, these sorts of meetings for decision making. Is that, first of all, true? And if that is the case, how does that work, or how is that, effective in a process like this?
When it comes to facilitation, I would say that our approach overall is that, unlike many consultants that want to sell you the end-to-end solution, we are about building capacity. So our role is not to create consultant dependency in which people are going to have to call us every day or every week to help them. But we want to define what are the right mindsets, the right behaviors, so people can run their business on their own. That's why they are paying their employees, not to have their consultants run their business. So in that sense, facilitation can come from conversations to unpack how people feel about the company, what's working, what's not working, and then facilitation of new processes, new ways of managing meetings, new way of making decisions to speed up the process, to make it easier, to make it less painful. Some of the processes we use are aligned with an agile approach, some not necessarily, but they're closer to them.
Well, and the reason I ask is that agile approach, I think, is particularly good for helping people in a group make a decision. And and I think, for people who don't really know, basically it's sort of everybody puts their ideas out and everybody votes and makes a decision, and you basically whittle down the group to singular decisions, or whatever it is. And so they use this methodology for software development and things like that to pick out new features. So, but what I love about that process or that methodology is the way that you could take a group of individuals and get basically everybody's input, but you almost always end up with a solution that they can go act on. It didn't come from you just facilitated it, so in your role as consultant, you help them arrive at their own decision, which also probably helps with implementation and everything else. So I think that that's a really smart way of approaching it. That's why I was curious.
No, absolutely. And one thing that's important, you talked earlier about buy-in, it's easier for the leader when people are involved in creating the solution. You don't need to sell it to them. So when the leader is the one that comes up with the solution, then they have to impose that, and the teams are going to be more reluctant to adopt it. So that's why I like also the people that are involved, so they have a sense of ownership as well.
I like that. Is there a good number of people to have on a team? And is there a certain point where there's too many people on a team to be effective, to where it's almost like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing? I've heard that if, the smaller the team, the more tight and the more kind of tribalism that you get, as to your example is when you came in and started changing things and people left. I've heard that's actually better to have smaller teams versus like 20, 30 people in a group, and maybe take that 20, 30 people, break them into 3 teams, and then you have 10 per team, and then everyone kind of becomes closer friends, works better together, so on and so forth. Have you noticed that in the past as being a good approach as far as limiting the number of people working on a specific topic?
Absolutely. I think that the smaller the team, the more effective, but you don't want the team to be either too small or too close. I think there's 2 things. Teams today are not fixed. So probably you have a base team, but you're interacting with other stakeholders across the company. So you're part of a smaller team, but also part of other multidisciplinary teams. Amazon uses this rule that is the 2 pizza rule, which is never invite to a meeting more people than the ones that you can feed with 2 pizzas. So that's a way of keeping them small. I like to use the 5+2 for meetings. Once again, you can have a team that's large, maybe you have 30, 50, 100, 1,000 people. But when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to ideation, like your colleague mentioned, something like that, keep it small. My number is 5+2. If you get more than 7 people in a room, the productivity goes down. To your point, very practical solution is always break down the team. You have 12 people into 2 teams and they work together and then they share and complement each other. But having a conversation with 15 people at a time is going to go nowhere. And rather than tap into that collective wisdom, you're going to get stuck with a lot of opinions and discussions and end the meeting with nothing happening. I have one of a company we used to work a couple of years ago. They have this very tribal kind of approach. And what ended up happening is everyone was invited to a meeting. And they have meetings that involve 50 people and sometimes even hundreds of people. There were 3 or 4 talking and a lot of people that were watching the game, the decision-making game. And it was a waste of time for everyone. So definitely keep it small.
Yeah, I think that's true. I notice on your back wall there, you have a shelf of yellow books in the background. I'm going to assume that's your Remote Not Distant book that you wrote.
Yeah. You're right.
How long did it take you to write that? Can you tell us about the process of writing it? And, I every time we get someone who has written a book, I always go down this road of what software did you use to write it? And the processes. Did you get it proofread by a third party, so on and so forth? Can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, sure. The whole process from ideation to inception took me like 6 months. I had some content and some frameworks in place. And throughout that time, I basically engaged in doing a lot of research, recapping stuff that I had produced in the past, as well as interviewing people, a lot of executives from different companies across the world, from larger companies to startups to everything in between, from CEOs to also team leaders. I hire someone to design the cover. I hire someone to help me with all the editorial editing, but also then copywriting at the end, copy editing at the end as well. And also one thing that was really valuable for me, it's involving people in the process. Once again, involving people to get input, not to tell me how to write the book or how to do it. So I share for example, the name and got people feedback, but then people voted and I didn't select the first or the top one. I chose the second name. The same happened with the cover. I focus more on the content that people posted, the comments, not just who voted what. And for me, that was really insightful. And also I invited people, I created like a group and I have people being early beta readers. And they provided feedback. Once again, I was very explicit about, hey, you're not writing your book. Put yourself in the reader's shoes. What's clear, what's not working, what makes sense, what would you get rid of? And it was really interesting to get in that part. And also as an author, to have someone like basically providing a candid feedback, like about your baby. Like in Pixar, right. They call the early ideas ugly babies until you make them beautiful. And it was great. And so I love it. But then those people became part of the marketing team and helped me also communicate the book and share it and stuff. So it was a great process.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, let's talk, I guess, then, as long as we're talking about the book, Remote Not Distant, let's talk a little bit more about remote work. Because I think, we've covered some of the basics of culture, but I'm curious just how you've seen things change over the course of your career. Obviously, we go with the pandemic and all this stuff. We, as you mentioned before, and it's true, remote work has been around for years. I've been doing it myself personally for more than 20 years. And, I know there are a lot of big, much larger companies that do the same thing and had been doing it the whole time. But I think what happened is when the pandemic happened, everybody started looking at these companies and decided to go remote, right? So there was this sudden rush to remote. And I know in my experience with talking to a lot of remote work advocates and leaders, they didn't feel like that was the right way to get into remote work, right? And then I think that's where you wound up with sort of these broken cultures or these broken companies where they were, I don't know, doing yet another video cocktail hour or video bowling or whatever it was, all these different things they were doing, looking at one another and just kind of replicating these things. And it became very tiresome and authentic. And, I don't think it worked very well. Then at the end of the pandemic, or as the pandemic started to clear up, people started going back to work in some cases they stayed remote, some cases they didn't. And then again, like it kind of wasn't the right way, right? Everything was sort of set up in a wrong way in the first place. And so the foundations were weak. And so I wondered if you could just sort of talk about your experience as a consultant in that space, talking about company culture and how it sort of existed pre-pandemic, what you did to help people sort of amid pandemic, so during the pandemic. And then now, as people are struggling with the concept of remote work, or forcing people back into the office or whatever, how you're seeing just sort of the whole sort of cultural landscape move around.
Yeah, I think that I can speak about what companies did and then how I help my clients. Many companies built around it. Of course, at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was more of everyone was on a defensive mode, trying to basically make sure that the ship stayed afloat. And that helped for the first, but then when everyone started seeing, hey, this is not going to go away tomorrow, some companies started being more strategic. So we have a lot of clients reaching out to say, hey, this is going to take 9 months, a year, maybe 2 years. So what are we going to do in the middle? No? So they started to be more intentional. Like to your point, playing beer games and having stupid like icebreakers over Zoom, maybe for the first week, 2 weeks, that's okay. But then you need something more foundational, not only in order to keep people excited, but also, okay, how are we going to make decisions virtually? How are we going to involve people? How are we going to manage a burnout? There's a lot of topics that are more structural that need to be or needed to be addressed. And many companies avoided them. No, so they say, hey, HR put some nice events together and that's culture. But they forget to tackle like issues, for example, what's called virtual presentism, because people feel that they are not seen as they used to. When you come to the office from 9 to 7, whatever the time is, your boss walks around and sees if people are on their desks working or not. When we're working remotely, what happens is people need to show up to unnecessary video calls or to unnecessary team building events to show they are working, or they need to send invites or emails or Slack messages to show, hey, I'm working, I'm not slacking, no pun intended. So I think that's one of the critical things about the culture, that rather than fix it or improve it, many things got worse. So now we have people that are working at least 1 hour per day, more than they used to, just to show to their managers, hey, I'm here, I'm busy, I'm a good professional. No, so the biggest thing is like, what are the changes that we're seeing? First, flexibility is a key element of work. So people work in different time zones, people work in different approaches. So one size fits all doesn't help. There's people are stuck in this, where do I work from? Do we work in the office? Do we work remotely? A mix of 3 days? And that's not what flexibility is all about. Flexibility is about defining your own work schedule based on your preferences. But I like to work I work much better at night. If I need to write, I write past midnight, and that's great. I hate to have a meeting at 7 a.m., but sometimes I need to have it because some of my clients are in other parts of the world. So getting people to choose where they're going to function the best, that's critical. There are some people that have elderly family members, or they have kids that they want to spend time with, or they need to spend time with. So let people define their schedule around their needs, around their preferences, around their working styles. But then with freedom comes accountability. So you need discipline. We need certain grounding rules. At some point, everyone needs to be available, let's say from noon to 3. So we need to have a call, we need to have a meeting. So that balance between freedom and discipline is, for me, the key of any successful culture in this new era. Imposing people back to the office without why. People are saying, if I was able to keep your business afloat for 2 years, why are you telling me as a leader that now you need me at the office? So it's not because they need me, it's because you want me, because leaders wants to be in their corner office rather than in a Zoom call. They want to have someone that can print or scan their documents, prepare their coffee, rather than have to do it themselves, because you might be a CEO, but you have an assistant in your house. So that changes also the power play, and a lot of people want to be back into that comfort area. No? So
I think that makes sense.
I noticed I saw on the news the other day that traffic in major metropolitan areas is starting to come back, whereas before it wasn't as bad. But they're getting to the same kind of traffic levels as pre-pandemic now, as people are starting to come back to work, and that to me just seems asinine. Why get in the car and have an hour commute and get all stressed out dealing with traffic just to go and sit in an office when I can do the same thing at home?
Yeah,
I,
and you made a good point about that, Gustavo. The point that, with freedom comes accountability, right? And I think that that's where a lot of people either succeeded or failed during this sort of period of the pandemic. And and it seems to me that a lot of these companies are just going back to work or forcing people back to work tend to be the companies that didn't crack culture, remote culture, in the period while everybody was working remote. So it seems to me that, hey, we didn't get it figured out, or we had a band-aid solution, and so now let's just go back to what used to work. And I think, so for me anyway, that's kind of a flag as an employer, as an employee. If my company is now raising the flag and saying everybody needs to come to work, that tells me they didn't do a good job with culture during the remote time.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier the signs, and that's a sign that there's a lack of trust. And people don't want to talk about this in the media because it's not nice, but in the end, leaders don't trust people. The leaders don't trust their teams. No, we talk about leaders like they are smart, but most leaders, and I experienced this pre-pandemic, really didn't trust their teams. Now that people are asking for freedom, for flexibility, they're asking for working from home, that lack of trust is becoming more evident. And that's the key driver where people are forcing people back into the office. Not because there's no data that shows that people are more productive in the office, nothing at all. But leaders just want people to be there at their own leisure and to observe people working and feel that they're in charge. People feel in the office, they feel in a more powerful position than when they are, once again, one of those small rectangles in a Zoom call.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned there is the flexibility of the time. I'm one of those people that, after 11 p.m., my brain just turns on, and I get more done between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. than I do most days during the day, just because when I'm productive. For someone like me who enjoys working at night, but occasionally, like just today, we just interviewed someone that was from Germany, so we had to get up and do an early AM interview. Obviously, there's those examples. How would someone like me go about trying to get permission from a supervisor or a boss to have those hours? Like, how would someone who is working remotely be able to, get the flexibility to work in the evenings or nights if they wanted to? Is it just a conversation with your boss and say, hey, this is my preferred time, and then, every day at 3 p.m. we get together for a quick meeting and then go from there, or is there more to it than that?
Are you asking how it works, how it should work?
Well, I mean, like, not how it works, but like, I don't see a lot of companies being, well, maybe now that it's been more prevalent in the work industry to work remote, that it's not necessarily a big problem. But a lot of people want you there 9 to 5 or be available 9 to 5. But sometimes it just, for people who work better at night, it almost makes more sense to, work when your brain's working the best or when you work the best. Is it just a matter of having a simple conversation with your boss and saying, hey, this is when I prefer to work? Is it okay with that? Or is it more, like in most instances, you need to just be available from 9 to 5?
I think that what I was mentioned with the way it works or the way it should work is, for some companies still, that you need to request permission from your manager. The companies that are successful, either fully remotely or work in a hybrid environment, they make those decisions at a team level. So it's not your manager, but it's you with your colleagues get together and create a craft team agreement. What's okay, what's not okay? Is it okay to have flexibility? Yes. Okay, we're going to have flexible schedules. So that means what? Everyone can define their own schedules, or we need to discuss everyone's schedule together, or we can do whatever, but then have some collaboration time agreed and everyone's going to be available. So that's the way to go, no? So decide it at a team level, not to ask your manager for permission. In the past, when people started working remotely, and that was one person's going to take maybe Friday off, that was the norm. I'm going to ask my manager, can it be an exception? Today, in which flexibility should be the driver, those conversations should happen at a team level.
Yeah.
Because in the end, what we're talking about is the shift. Leaders need to focus more into creating the right environment and focus more into the outcome, not the input. Rather than watching how many hours people work, if they are available or not, are people doing great work? Are they delivering on results? That's what matters. That's what leaders should be putting the energy, and not on tracking how many hours or how many keywords are we typing on.
I was actually going to ask you about that, because they do have software where they can track what you're typing, what you're doing, where you're at. That almost to me seems more invasive, and I wouldn't want to work in a company that would micromanage me to that level. What are your experiences with tracking software, and is it a good or a bad thing?
I think it's completely wrong in many aspects, not only because we shouldn't get into the point of controlling. That we can control certain information or track doesn't mean that we shouldn't track it. But I think it talks how companies and leaders are spending time and money and technology in the wrong problems. Because once again, instead of trying to say, hey, how can we become more innovative? How can we spend time coming up with new ideas? How can we engage people so people don't pretend that they're working there? You get what you reward. If you reward presenteeism, people are going to start typing bullshit all day. They're going to show up there. They're going to turn on their cameras. They're going to basically work around the system, because that's what you're basically promoting. If you reward results, but then provide freedom, people are going to have to do everything they do to achieve their goals. What are we getting? We're getting a culture of playing the system, not of setting a high performance bar.
I like that.
I think that's right. And it's funny, just that point of conversation. I've seen a increase in ads lately for these little devices that you can set your mouse on to keep moving your mouse all day so that your employer thinks you're working. And Gustavo's point earlier about trust, right? I mean, tracking my movements, tracking my keystrokes, all that stuff. Like, I mean, what says I don't trust you more than that? So I mean, if you're trying to build a healthy culture, in your company, and basically you're encouraging people to lie, cheat, and steal, like, I mean, you're building a horrible culture. Like, so this is not a good way to go.
Absolutely.
So Gustavo, we're getting to the end of the show. I wondered if you wouldn't just take a quick minute and tell people how they might engage with you individually if they wanted to, or if how they might learn more about your business or get involved with you in one way or another.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I mean, Dick, people can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And I think I'm the only Gustavo Razzetti with ZZT there. So that's easy. And if not, you can visit our website, which is fearlessculture.design. It's .design, not .com. fearlessculture.design, and you can subscribe. We have a weekly newsletter with lots of insight. There's a lot of tools and articles that you can download or read for free. And there's my contact information. If you want to chat, if you want to get some advice or need help with your culture, you can also use the website to get in touch with us.
Where can someone get a copy of your book?
Starting on Amazon, or you can go target.com, walmart.com, barsandnobles.com, and many other sites.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for making time for us. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's been an eye-opener, so thank you.
Likewise. Thank you guys for hosting me. Really enjoy. I hope your audience enjoy it too.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.